Shattuck, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. And before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that I am recording this presentation, and I'll be sending out the recording a little later on this afternoon, as well as Rebecca's slides. So look for an email later from me if you want to review the content, or maybe share it with a friend or a coworker. You'll be able to do that. And during the presentation, please don't be afraid to chat in any questions or comments you have. We're going to save some time at the end of the presentation for some Q&A. So don't be shy. We'll have some time, probably 5 or 10 minutes for questions towards the end of the presentation. And if this is your first webinar with us, welcome. Thanks for being here. We do these webinars just about every Thursday. We bring on a guest for an educational presentation. And in addition to doing that, Bloomerang also offers a really great donor management software program. If you're in the market for that, we'd love for you to check it out. You can learn more about that on our website, and we'd love for you to do that. Just let me know if you have any questions there. So I want to go ahead and introduce our guest. She is Rebecca Davis, PhD, CFRE. Hey, Rebecca, how's it going?
Great. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad for you to be here too. Yeah, it's awesome, and I think we've been planning this since I think way back in November. So it's fun for that date to finally be here. Lots of people registered. I know they're interested in the topic. This is a topic that we get requested quite a bit. So it's great to have you. For those of you who don't know Rebecca, Rebecca has more than 25 years of professional experience in academic and nonprofit settings, in fundraising, event management, volunteer coordination, adult education, research, and writing. She's a graduate of the AFP, that's the Association of Fundraising Professionals Faculty Training Academy. And Rebecca is a master trainer as well, who has been a certified fundraising executive, CFRE, since 2007. She's worked with lots of organizations, the Alzheimer's Association, National Down Syndrome Congress, the Children's Center for Hope and Healing, all kinds of places. She's been a development director, she's been an ED, and she's coordinated lots of sponsorship campaigns. And that's what she's going to be talking to you about today. So Rebecca, I'm not going to take any more time away from you. Why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Sure. Well, yeah, I know a lot of people in the fundraising profession have mixed feelings about special events, but I'm one of those who happens to love them. I enjoy participating in them, and of course we all know that special events, one of the keys to making them successful is having a successful sponsorship campaign and having sponsorships really come in strong. That's one of the ways that we can make our special events successful. So I want to talk today to you about how to lead a sponsorship campaign. I believe that one of the keys to a strong sponsorship campaign is to run it like a campaign, much like a capital campaign or an annual campaign, by planning it tactically like a campaign, and that one of the keys to that is to recruit a team and to organize your team and to manage your team, to provide leadership to your team. Now, I have talked to some foundation and corporate relations specialists in the fundraising profession who believe that they personally should solicit all of their corporate partners, all of their sponsorships, that they should be the one to get out and touch base with them every single year. They should be the one to make the asks. And I understand their reasonings, and that's great, but a lot of us in the fundraising world don't work in positions where we have the luxury of time to be able to personally make the ask of every single corporate partner or corporate prospect that we have in our organization. We just have too many prospects to be able to see. Plus, I personally believe that I don't have a monopoly on passion for the organization, on connections and opportunities to open doors. And I've certainly been at some organizations where I've had board members and volunteers who've been at least as good, if not better, than I have at asking. So why not bring them along on the team and empower them and set them to work and let them work their magic? Some of them are really, really good. So I want them to be on the team and to ask. I believe that our boat will go further and faster if I put other team members in it and allow them to row. And as I want to point out throughout this presentation, there are things that people who are not good at asking can do to help the sponsorship team and to help us get to a larger goal. And I do believe that good askers are not born, that they are made, that you can teach most people to ask, but some people aren't good at it for one reason or another. Some people don't have the common sense. I've certainly worked with some volunteers who had the heart but maybe not the common sense or the right manners or whatever, so I didn't want them asking. But there are things that they can do too, and I'm going to try to point those out throughout the way. I believe that sponsorship campaigns are a lot like rowing. And I believe rowing, though I don't know a lot about the sport, I believe rowing is really beautiful. The synchronicity of it, the way that the team makes it look almost effortless. There's a lot going on under the water, under the surface. There are a lot of adjustments being made. The slides are not advancing, sorry. Even I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
The slide I see is sponsorship campaigns are like rowing, and we got a picture of the rowers. Is that where you want to be?
No, I actually want to be one ahead.
There you go.
There it goes.
You did it.
Good. Okay. But they actually require a lot of coordination and effort. They require a lot of leadership, and in fact, the rowing team, if you take a close look at a rowing team in some sort of competition, there's someone on the team who sits in the very back of the boat who is called the coxswain. And this person is usually a lot smaller than other people in the boat. This person is usually facing the opposite way of everybody else. Everybody else in the boat faces backwards. And the coxswain is the one and only person facing forward. And they have a headset on, and they talk to the team through the headset throughout the rowing race. And they are calling tiny little adjustments throughout the race to each of the members, telling them which way to pull, which way to adjust their oars, how hard to pull. They're basically, since none of the other rowers can see the river ahead, can see the currents, can see the way the wind is coming across the river, the coxswain is telling everybody which way to go so that they don't end up going in circles, and is coordinating everything. And this person, the coxswain, often doesn't get a lot of credit because he or she is not rowing, and sometimes gets a little teased or harassed for not rowing, not pulling his or her weight. But this person is really key to navigating the river. And I want you as a fundraiser to think of yourself kind of like the coxswain, calling the shots, coordinating, and making it happen. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward, because you're the person who's going to map out the strategy, and the team is going to come to count on you to help coordinate what you're doing throughout the fundraising campaign. Now, the first thing that you need to do to get your campaign together is to put your sponsorship offer together. And while I say it's the first thing, I actually do it sort of as the last thing at the end of last year's campaign, because when I'm wrapping up last year's campaign, I do a debrief on last year's campaign, and I think on last year's campaign, what worked well last year, what didn't work well, what could I have done last year to sweeten the deal for my sponsors. I am constantly looking for what I can do to make my sponsorship offers more attractive to my sponsors. Now, we who love our organizations, we tend to think that our sponsorship opportunities are great. Why wouldn't our business partners want to partner with us and be sponsors with us? But go to a professional baseball game, or go to have the opportunity, go to a racetrack, a car racetrack, go to a NASCAR event, or some other professional and go to an Indy 500 event or something similar, and take a look at how they treat their sponsors and what their sponsors have the opportunity to have, and then think about your own event. And what you'll quickly realize is that what the typical nonprofit organization can offer its sponsors in comparison to what a professional or even an amateur sports event can offer its corporate partners are very, very different. And for the most part, we're not as strong a partner in many, many ways as a lot of sporting events are for our corporate partners. Now, we do have some other things to offer. We have really loyal, passionate followers, and we have a great image, and being associated with our great image can be really good for our corporate partners. But there's some exposure and some media opportunities and some other things that typically the typical nonprofit can't offer. So we have to really think about how, what it is that our corporate partners want, and what we can do to make ourselves as attractive a partner as we possibly can. I'm often surprised when I first start to work with a nonprofit partner at just exactly how little the nonprofit organization actually knows about what kind of a partner they are for a corporate organization, for a sponsorship opportunity. I'll start working with a nonprofit organization, and they won't have any idea how many website visitors on average they have each month. They won't have any idea how many email addresses they have, or if they mail a newsletter, they won't know how many addresses it reaches. And those are the kind of statistics that you really need to know, because you need to know what your reach is. You need to have all that data. And for your event, you need to write a media plan. That in and of itself, having a written media plan and being able to articulate to your sponsors what you're going to do in terms of how you're going to promote the event, and how you're going to share the event during the event, it is going to make you more attractive to a potential sponsor. So you need to put your sponsorship offer together. You're going to need to be able to figure out how to make it attractive to your sponsors before you even begin. And if you don't know what your sponsors want, then talk to them. Ask them, what are you looking for in a partnership? They may actually surprise you. One of the things that I am hearing more and more from corporate partners about what they're looking for is engagement opportunities. They don't just want their logo on our poster. They want an opportunity to actually interact with our participants. So, for example, when I was working with the Alzheimer's Association, the people who showed up at our events most often were people who had a loved one with some form of dementia. And one of our biggest sponsors, or biggest sets of sponsors, of course, were people who were in the long-term care industry. And they wanted to interact with our participants at our events because they recognized that sooner or later a lot of the people who were at our events were going to be looking for a long-term care placement for their loved one. And similarly, I just got back from the Association of Fundraising Professionals conference, and a lot of the vendors were interested in the exhibit hall and in the address list of the participants, because they wanted to mail the participants to interact with us, to tell us about their product and invite us to come by their booth so that we could learn more about their product. That's an engagement opportunity, and companies are very much interested in that. So think about what engagement opportunities you can offer at your event for the people you're interested in working with. You're going to want to attach some value to your sponsorship offer. Are you going to ask $10,000? Are you going to ask $50,000? Are you going to ask $500 for your sponsorship level, your sponsorship package? And that's really dependent on two things, both of which require some market research. One is, what do other nonprofit organizations in your area charge for a similar package? If you're in a small community, what you're going to be able to charge is going to be different than if you're in a very large city. You're going to need to do some research on what others in your area are charging. Recently I did some market research for an organization on golf tournament sponsorships in their area, and what I found was they were very competitive and very much in the right market or right money realm for the large sponsorships, but they were way off in the small one, and they were missing opportunities in the whole sponsorship area. They were only charging $75 for whole sponsorship, and everybody else in the community was charging a lot more. So for some of the smaller levels, I encouraged them to step it up and charge more. The other piece of that is not just what do other nonprofit organizations charge, but what are businesses paying? What are they willing to pay for example, for a newspaper ad? If you can give them equivalent coverage to a newspaper ad in some of your press and your website and so forth, and they pay for that in other media places, what do those cost them to buy? So you can compare kind of that way also and put a value on those things, and then you know what you can market your packages for. Some great additions to your package or to your offer that will help you sell your package: testimonials from past sponsors. If you can even get some of your past sponsors to reach out and to say, hey, this was a phenomenal opportunity for me, that it can be really impactful and really powerful in helping you to attract a new sponsor. News clips from your event last year also are very, very helpful. So here's one of the ways that your volunteers can help from the get-go. So after you've put your sponsorship package together and you've put your opportunity together, one of the first ways that your volunteers can help is by identifying your prospects. And here is one of the many opportunities that, or many ways that people who are not good at asking can help. They can help identify prospects, help generate a prospect list. Where are you going to find your prospects? Of course, as always in fundraising, one of the best places to find your donors is with your past donors. So your last year sponsors are, of course, the best place to start, but you can also look to your board members' companies. I'm amazed sometimes at how board members' companies haven't been invited to be a sponsor, but your board members' associates companies, your board members' companies' vendors, the organizations, vendors, the companies interested in your audience. Again, think about the Alzheimer's example and how, the people who were interested in the people who were at our event. And also look in your community at who has marketing dollars. And that's just a start. Brainstorm with your committee, and they'll help you generate, I imagine, we've never had trouble in any of the committees I've worked on generating more prospects than we could possibly get to. And while we usually start with the low-hanging fruit, start with the people who were easiest, so we nail a bunch of sponsorships and then move on to people who are more distant from us. One year, one committee I worked with decided, you know what, we know we're going to get sponsorships from these people. Let's start with people we don't think we're going to get sponsorships from, with new relationships, and work on those first, and then come back to the people that we're really confident are going to give us sponsorships, because sometimes we never have time to get to the people who are long shots. So we started with long shots first, and we got a tremendous number of new relationships and new sponsorships. It was a great year for us. So that is a strategy that I recommend you consider, is starting not with the low-hanging fruit, starting not with last year's prospects or last year's sponsors, but starting with people that you're going to have to work at a little bit. Again, some more roles for people who don't belong on the asking front. Sponsor care. So after you've signed a sponsor on the dotted line, there's a lot of work that has to be done after they've said yes. After they've signed on, you need to write them a welcome package. And that welcome package needs to, of course, first thing say thank you, but you need to go over their benefits with them, even though you went over them in the sales part of the relationship. But I'm always amazed at people who somehow don't understand their benefits. I've had sponsor relationships where I've gone over the benefits in the development of the relationship, and then, they choose the sponsorship and then somehow don't realize that they have a table at a gala, and it gets close to the gala and they don't realize that they have tickets, and I'm talking to them about who's going to take their tickets, who's going to fill their table, and they're like, we have a table? So start going over that again and again with them. So this is a great thing for people who aren't good at asking to do, is to follow up. Now, we're so excited that you're coming, and who's going to be sitting at your table, and to touch base with them about that multiple times. That way you're not, a few weeks from the gala and talking to them about who's going to fill the table, and they're scrambling to figure out who's going to fill the table, because you do want the table to be filled. I mean, you want your event to be full. You want it to look like a success, and if you have empty seats, it's not going to look like a success. And if you have a silent auction, you of course want it to be full, because you want bidders at your auction. Just thinking about one type of event. So, you want them to know what their benefits are. You want them to, you often want them to use their benefits, so you can involve the person who's not good at asking in that part of the sponsorship committee. Also at the event itself, you can have someone who's not good at asking assigned to be a sponsor greeter, or to act like a sponsor concierge. Make sure that the sponsor's wine glass is not empty. Introduce them to people. Introduce them to board members. Help them make sure they're comfortable working the room. Some sponsors are just like everybody else in that they can be shy. They can be uncomfortable networking. So, someone who's not especially good at asking can help make them feel more comfortable and welcome and do all those sorts of things. So there are lots of different things. When you have your volunteer committee, of course, one of the first things that you have to do is provide some training for them, especially if you're going to involve them in the process of making contacts with potential sponsors and asking. And the biggest thing that I find that I have to help volunteers understand is that I have to help them understand the motivations of potential sponsors. I find that volunteers who have these tremendously big hearts don't understand that businesses often have very different motivations for getting involved as sponsors than they themselves have for getting involved as volunteers. And so I have to help them understand that businesses don't usually have big-hearted philanthropic reasons for getting involved as sponsors. Some do, of course, but many of them have business motivations for getting involved in the nonprofit organization and the nonprofit organization's event. So I have to help volunteers understand that, and so I have to explain cause marketing and some of the objectives of cause marketing. And that's one of the biggest things that we go over in volunteer training. And of course, people have to learn to ask. I do believe that's a skill that people acquire and not something that people are generally born knowing how to do. I find that the writings of Gerald Panis are very, very good for that. His book Asking is great for that. Several others of his books are really, really helpful, and I often use excerpts from his books with volunteers and volunteer trainings because he has sample scripts of questions and answers that donors have given in situations that he's been in. And these help with things like sample scripts for getting a meeting, sample scripts for overcoming objections, and a lot of other things. So I find his writings, several of his books, really, really useful for training, and I recommend them. Everybody hates role play. They feel very, very put on the spot, but at the AFP Faculty Training Academy that I attended, I think it was 2010, BJ Bischoff taught the course, and she shared with us a way of role play that I'm sure is not original to her, but that's where I learned it. It's team-based and collaborative, so there are two seats at the front, and basically you line everybody up behind one or the other, and you take turns sitting in the hot seat, and the person behind the person in the chair taps the person in the chair on the shoulder and relieves them so that they're no longer in the hot seat. And you take turns, and it's you know, and round you go. So the person in the hot seat is only in the hot seat a couple of minutes, and then they get tapped out, and the next person sits down and role plays for a few minutes. And so it's actually a lot of fun to do it that way because you're only in the hot seat a couple of minutes, and people on the team behind the person in the chair help coach the person in the chair on how to role play. And it's a much more fun way to role play and practice asking, and then somebody can practice being the donor with objections or questions. And so that's worked really well in volunteer training on asking. Another thing that's important, I find, to talk about in volunteer training on asking is that they need to know what's going to come up when they go ask. They need to know that questions are going to come up, that negotiations are going to come up, that issues are going to come up, and so you need to prepare them for those. When you yourself go out and ask for a sponsorship, what comes up? What questions? What objections typically come up? And so you need to think through how you want them to handle those issues. And it may be that you don't want them to handle those issues. And so you tell them, if this, or this comes up, I want you to say, you know what, I've got to get back to the development director and get back to you. So you need to say, this is the limit of your empowerment. I don't want you to get into these things. So, at this point, you need to just tell them, I'll have to call you back. or it may be that you want to empower them to handle one or two of these issues, but not others. But whatever it is that you want, you need to think it through in advance. You need to anticipate it, and then you need to tell them to anticipate it and let them know how you want them to resolve it. And then another big thing that we talk about in training is the role of coordination and the role that you play in coordination. And this is something that comes up all the time when there are lots of volunteers asking, is just the role of coordination. I find, volunteers go out and I want them to generate new prospects. But I find that lots of them will generate the same prospect. Rebecca, I was driving around town and I thought, we should ask Sam's Club. And I think that's great, But 10 people have said we should ask Sam's Club. That's great. Well, my very worst fear is that somebody goes ahead and asks Sam's Club, and somebody asked Sam's Club for $25. And, really I wanted to ask Sam's Club for $1,000 or $5,000. And actually, that's a small example. There may be some other company that I wanted to ask for a whole lot more, and somebody's asked them for $25. And then what happens? The company gives $25. The company expects you to be grateful. The company feels proud. The company feels like they've done their part. And you're kind of in this awkward position because you wanted to ask them for a whole heck of a lot more. So it's really a terrible position to be in. Yeah, I don't want anybody to ask without talking to me first. So I'm talk to them in volunteer training about, it's great for you to come up with ideas, but please talk to me first, because I explained to them that once we've asked, we can't. It's really, really difficult to go back and ask for a different amount, and it may be that the amount that we initially asked for is really not the right amount to ask for. So I explained that. I also explained that, if we have one person approaching a company for one amount and another person approaching for another, then it looks like the right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. And it does make us look like we're ill-prepared and like we don't really know what we're doing and that we're not coordinated. And that doesn't make us look like a good candidate for a sponsorship. So we want to coordinate that. And of course, out of volunteer training, I want the volunteers to walk away equipped. And so, one of the things I want to give them, and this picture actually is supposed to look like Reese Witherspoon in her Roll in the Wild, all loaded down with her horrible backpack. I want them to have all the information they're going to need to be able to ask, but really I don't want them that loaded down. There will inevitably be some volunteer who wants to be that loaded down. And for that volunteer, I will give them whatever they need to be that loaded down, because I find that volunteer will not feel safe and secure without being that loaded down. So if they want all the stuff, if they want to be that loaded down, I will load them that down that much. But most people will not need all of this stuff, just some of it. But there will be some volunteers who will require every single item on this list in order to feel safe and secure going out into the world to ask. So decide what things your volunteers are most likely going to need to be equipped to be asked, and some of these things you're definitely going to need, and make sure that they have those. Maybe you want to provide them electronically on a flash drive. More and more often that's how I give them to volunteers these days. One of the things that I almost always make sure that people have is an emergency number for me. That way that they know how they can always get in touch with me, and that makes everybody feel peace of mind and safe and secure. And once they have that, they're good to go. one of the things in sponsorship kits, sometimes organizations or people will want to put DVDs or videos on USB flash drives or something. Don't do it. Every business I've ever talked to says they don't watch them. They end up in the trash. So even if your communications director says, but our DVD is going to win an Emmy, or Theo James himself made a personal appearance to attest to the worthiness of our organization, don't do it. And if somebody tells you you must, put it in the package and let it slip out in your car on the way somewhere. It's not going to get watched. It's just not. So unless the company you're going to visit has a CEO who calls you and says, my wife watched it in her Sunday school class and she begged me to ask you to bring it over and watch it with me. Unless that happens, don't take it into somebody's office and expect them to watch it with you. They don't want to. So I would not include under any circumstances a DVD. At the conclusion of your first volunteer training, I'd make sure that folks walked away with some sort of resource or reference manual, and I do that for a lot of reasons. I find that when people walk away with something physical, like a notebook, a 3-ring notebook, a USB flash drive, something they feel like they have something tangible that reminds them they learned something. And it's also comforting to people. They feel like they have something to refer back to when they have a moment of anxiety and feel like they can't remember something important. And also people like me, I'm one of those people who is so in the moment. And when the moment's over, I realize that I don't remember something I thought I did. I did at that moment. I was totally with you, but then the moment's passed, and I'm like, what was that? I can't recall, and so I need to go back to something to bring it back up. So that's helpful there. And then in terms of volunteer assignments, you've got a long list of prospects. You've got a list of volunteers. So how are you going to pair the volunteer up with the prospect? And initially, I pair volunteers up with only a couple of prospects. I don't pair all the prospects up with all the volunteers initially. I set up prospects or volunteers only with a couple of prospects, and then leave the rest for later to pair after I kind of see how things are going. I don't want to give volunteers a long list of assignments because I don't want to overwhelm them. And I also, again, want to see how things are going. And if somebody's doing great, I want to give them more. If somebody's moving a little slow or not having a lot of success, I want to kind of wait till they find their voice and get their feet on the ground before giving them a lot more. But early on, I pair everybody with just a couple, and I try to find a couple on the list that are going to be easy asks for everybody. I set people up to win. I don't give anybody a really difficult assignment at first. Not new volunteers, not people who've never asked before. Personally, when I get a success, and probably a lot of you on this webinar are the same, when I hear a yes and when I close a sponsorship or get a gift, it's like a little burst of dopamine for me. It is a high. And I got hooked on that high a very, very long time ago. And I want my volunteers to experience that, because I feel like if I can get them to experience that, I can get them hooked. And so I want them to have that early victory. I want them to know what that feels like. I just think it feels so awesome that they'll get hooked and they'll continue and they'll come back and come back and come back. And so I set them up for success early on, and then later, when they've had some successes and know that they can do it, I'll give them a little bit more challenging assignments. I try typically to save the really terrible assignments always for myself. If there's a prospect on my list who is a total curmudgeon or is a really difficult negotiator and just makes my life miserable, I try to keep that person for myself always. I try not to subject any volunteer to the very worst of the prospects. In terms of getting in the door, just a couple of thoughts or ideas. You all know how to use connections to get in the door, but a couple of other thoughts on this. You can use letters of introduction from well-known community members to get in the door, but and you've probably done that or tried that as well. One thing that I have done with great success a couple of times where my organizations have had events that they've tried to really ratchet up, or one time I was working for an organization that had almost no community visibility, even though it was a 25-year-old organization, and it was kind of relaunching an event. The organization held a free breakfast for corporate leaders and got a bunch of corporate leaders into a room, got somebody to sponsor the breakfast, to pay for the breakfast, so it was free for the corporate leaders, and just did a very short, like 15-minute presentation, had the breakfast be about 15 minutes long before work, kind of 8:30ish or 8 o'clock. I can't remember exactly what time we had it. Anyway, we gave just a really brief overview. You know, this is who we are in 3 to 5 minutes, and we're launching this or relaunching this event. And you know, even though we've been around in the community for a long time, you may not be aware of us. We've been operating pretty quietly. We've been doing good work. We've been here, but we've been operating pretty quietly, and we're relaunching this event. We'd like to reach out to you to talk to you about it. We feel like it's an event that you would be very interested in, and we'd like to talk to you about sponsorship. There's a card in your seat. If we could just follow up, we'd love for you to leave your name and your contact information. And there's a flyer in your seat. And people filled out the card and left it and said, you can contact us. So we got people's permission to contact them to talk further. You know, it was no obligation, just leave us your information if we can follow up for a 20, 30-minute chat. So we got people's permission to contact them to talk about sponsorship. It was great. So we grew sponsorship significantly that year. And again, I've had a couple of organizations do that, and we've always had really good success. It was, you know, permission-based marketing. It was wonderful. I encourage you to try that. Sponsorship care, you know, we talked about this a little bit when we talked about volunteers who don't ask. Some of the sponsors that I have and that you have, I'm sure, are very high maintenance. I want them to feel very well treated, and so this is something that's important to do, even if they don't literally get a facial or some sort of a mud bath. I want them to feel really well cared for, and so that's extremely important. When we wrap up the volunteer training and coaching, it's not a one-time thing. It's not a one and done. So usually we have a volunteer training session to get started, but then we continue to do coaching all through the campaign. And depending on your organization and its geography, that may, you know, depending on how dispersed you are, and I have worked with organizations that have been dispersed across the state. I've worked with organizations that have been in one city, and I've worked with organizations that are stretched out all across the country. So, you know, depending on your geography, you might get together face-to-face, you might get together over Google Hangouts, you might get together over a conference call. However you can. I love it if you can be face-to-face some way. I'd love it if you can be in person. But if you can't, you know, call over a conference call and share your successes and talk through what's going on. If you can identify a common problem or two, or even if it's not common, if somebody can share, this is a challenge I'm running into, and you can brainstorm that person's challenge with each other, you can all learn from that. If you can share a success, you can all learn from that as well, and it's a great way to publicly praise someone for what's going on. Plus, it's just good morale to celebrate people's successes. One of the things you can do to keep energy and momentum going is just to celebrate and to offer encouragement. A theme is often very, very fun. One year for a volunteer training, we took the Finding Nemo movie and took Dory's advice to just keep swimming. And we concluded the volunteer training with a little clip from Nemo where Dory was singing, just keep swimming, swimming. And my volunteers loved it. They thought it was hilarious. And so we were swimming throughout the volunteer campaign. And in fact, on the right, there's a picture of some board members. And at the last board meeting before the event, I took a bunch of dollar store swim goggles into the board meeting, and I passed around a bucket full of swim goggles and said, I invite you to put on your swim goggles, and I invite you to put them on your rear view mirror of your car, and as you drive around town for the next couple weeks, I want you to use them as a reminder to go ahead and make one more ask. That one more ask could make a huge difference in whether or not we make goal. And I swear, as I drove around town for the final few weeks of the campaign, I saw swim goggles bobbing in people's rearview mirrors. And these board members that evening, the one in the middle was 80-some or 90-some years old, were swimming in the board meeting and had their goggles on. That is absolutely one of my favorite pictures. So here, back to the rowing, the coxswain, the team's coordinator in rowing, the tradition has it he or she gets dumped in the river at the end of the race if they're successful. And in this particular campaign where we were swimming through the volunteer campaign with the Finding Nemo theme, at the end of the campaign we were very successful. It was a great campaign. I was giving out some volunteer awards at a celebration, and a couple of my volunteers came busting through the door on the 6-foot inflatable Nemo singing, just keep swimming, swimming, and you can tell they were very happy there in this picture. And I think this was the fundraiser's version of being dumped in the drink. So that was definitely a happy day. Just to recap, so to run a successful campaign, you need to build your team, identify your prospects, put together your sponsorship offer, train the team, teach them to ask, help them understand your corporate partners, equip them, give them ongoing support, set them up for success, coordinate, help volunteers get in the door, take care of your sponsors, celebrate success. And then finally, the last thing we're going to talk about is debrief after the event. And you need to, or ask your volunteers to debrief with your sponsors after the event. Find out what they thought about the event. What were their expectations? Were they met? Were they exceeded? How can you improve the event next year? And I ask, are you willing to be a sponsor next year? And if I can close next year's sponsorship at the end of this year's campaign, I try to. And again, to come back to putting your offer together for next year, this debrief process is part of that. What can I learn that's going to help me put my sponsorship offer together for the following year? And again, just to reemphasize, if I can close the deal for next year, I go ahead and try. So we are going to wrap it up here and take some questions, but I want to let you know how you can reach me. I am a consultant who lives and works in the mountains of North Georgia, and all of my contact information is on my website, which is on this slide, and I encourage you to reach out to me anytime. I'd love to hear from all of you. So if you don't get your question answered today, I'm happy to take your questions by email through this web address that's on this slide.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. That was an awesome presentation. You got 10 minutes to stick around for questions. Is that okay with you?
That sounds great.
Cool. We got a few come in already, and just want to encourage people to ask away. We've got Rebecca here for probably about 10 more minutes. Rebecca, I'll just kind of roll through these. Meredith here is wondering, what do you find are the biggest motivations on behalf of business to sponsor nonprofit events? What have you run into? What do you find is the biggest motivation there?
Yeah. Well, with cost marketing, businesses are looking for a partner, someone who can help them someone who can help them reach their objectives. So, whatever their objectives are, if their objectives are to reach more customers, then they want to partner with somebody who can help them reach more customers. And again, to keep drawing from the Alzheimer's Association example, similarly, one of the clients that I'm working with right now is in senior care, working in senior services, and we're partnering with, again, a lot of organizations who serve seniors. So, they have an interest in people who are interested in the people who follow our organization. So for your client base, share your objectives. So some of the other things, people, businesses want to look good to their employees and to their customers. So, if they can be associated with you and that can help them with employee morale or with their customer constituents, that's really, really positive. So if you have a really, really positive reputation in your community or across the country, and that plays well with their constituency, that's going to help them also.
Cool. Jamie here was wondering, if you are starting from scratch and need to get in the door with a company, which department do you typically reach out to when you're first making that initial contact?
Great question. First of all, I'd look and see if I have a personal connection. If there's a board member who has a connection with somebody who's in finance, I would start with the person in finance who I know and ask them if they can open a door for me. If I don't have a personal connection, I go to marketing. Marketing has control of the dollars most of the time for these sorts of things and makes most of these decisions. If I can't get anywhere with marketing, I then usually go to HR.
Makes sense. Tess here was wondering, any strategies for amping up sponsors for higher level sponsorships for maybe their anniversary year or the second or third year that they've supported you? What about upgrading sponsors who already support you?
Yeah, well, that's where making sure that you're just like with a donor, you're treating the relationship personally, that you're actually going to see someone. I'm working with one client right now where we're starting up a sponsorship campaign for an event that's annual, and this client is new and we've never worked together before. And the board president said something to me about just emailing or mailing out the sponsorship solicitations, and I was like, I really like to talk to somebody. And if possible, I like to see them face to face. It's the same principle as with individual giving. If you can get face to face, you're going to get better results. I want to start to build a relationship with sponsors. I want to know somebody. I want to talk to them. And so, after 2 or 3 years, I want to be able to say, this is great. I want to have had the relationship where each year we've talked about, were your expectations met? What did you want to get out of this? Did you get what you wanted out of this? And then, after I know they've had a good experience for a couple of years, I want to say, look, I've been thinking about you, and I know you have this fantastic anniversary this year. I was thinking, let's do something special. I have some ideas. Let's brainstorm. pitch some ideas to them, listen to what they pitch back, and then brainstorm together and see if you can come up with some special ideas and some special pricing to see if you can take them to a new level that works for you and works for them.
Cool, cool. Speaking of pricing, here's a question from Laura. She works at a very small organization, and she's wondering how to first figure out the sizes of the sponsorships. So defining those levels. What is a good way, or what advice would you have for Laura for actually defining those sponsorship levels for the first time?
Yeah, that's where I would start with the market research. I'd look at what other organizations in your area are doing. I recently did this for a nonprofit organization in a small community that was doing a golf tournament, and I pulled, I think, 13 different golf tournament sponsorship proposals from 13 other organizations in that community, and just reviewed what were their levels, what did they offer at those levels, what did they price those levels at, and then looked at what did I feel like the organization I was working for could price their levels at, what should they offer. I wanted to push it as far as I could, but I didn't want to push it so far that we were much more expensive than everybody else, or that we didn't offer competitive benefits. I wanted our benefits to be competitive, but I also wanted our dollars to be as high as possible, without pricing ourselves out of the market. So I would take a look at your market.
Makes sense. We've probably got time for one last question, and I know we didn't get to all of them, but Rebecca, would you be willing to take some questions over email? Is that fair to say?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, while we do this last question, I'll just put your contact information back up on the screen. Question here from Jody. Jody has 2 events, one in the spring and one in the fall. What do you think about asking the same companies to sponsor both events? Do you think that would be kind of taboo to ask them for both? Would you just ask for one and not the other? What do you think there?
I ask the same company all the time. If they're interested and willing, yay. I would not hesitate, and I would be sure and thank them profusely and tell them how much we appreciate their incredible support, and tell them how much we are so glad they're willing to support all of our events. And you know what? I'd also consider offering them a package, or offering them some additional perks because they're such a phenomenal supporter. You don't want to start to lose money, but they really are a phenomenal supporter if they're willing to do both events. So see what you can do for them. Show them the love.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca, this was really awesome having you. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. Quite a few people listening in, so thank you to all of you for taking an hour out of your day to hang out with us. Rebecca, we'll have to have you back next year, hopefully.
Thank you so much. It was great. And again,
yeah.
I welcome questions anytime.
Cool. And I'll be sending out the slides as well as the recording of this whole presentation a little later on. So look for an email from me. We'd love to see you again. There's lots of more educational content on Bloomerang's website. Just check out our resources section. I'd love for you to do that. We do these webinars every Thursday. Got a couple more here in April. A couple cool topics coming out. Next week, 1 week from today, we're going to talk about getting your board on board with fundraising. And 2 weeks from today, we're going to talk about direct mail appeals and how to write them, how to maybe tell your stories a little bit better. Really cool topics there. Sign up for one of those if they look interesting. Joy, send me an email about your question that you just sent over to me. And if any of you have any more questions, you can always email me. And please do email Rebecca there if we didn't get to your question. I know we just about ran out of time there, so sorry about that. But we'd love to see you again. So we'll call it a day there. Thanks for hanging out with us for an hour or so, and we will talk to you hopefully next week. Bye now.